I'm going to take you on to curriculum. Again, let's just, what do we know about curriculum? Well, good, pacey, interesting curriculum, well taught, does much to reduce behavior problems. That's a self-evident truth, but one that, again, needs to be consistently applied. We've got to begin to sort of differentiate the curriculum to the needs of different youngsters. And again, I think there's a developmental sequence here. Again, we'll pick up this point this afternoon. But, you know, most of you face the challenge of personalization inside of your own schools to a greater or lesser extent. We begin to address personalization initially through the differentiation of curricular content. But the progression here is to begin to differentiate through pedagogy later on. All right? And I'll talk a bit more this afternoon how we can do that. But I think the principle of differentiation is really important, and you know, the richness of the curricular provision. And again, this is a point that came out in a lot of discussion this morning. It wasn't sort of quite that evident in terms of the 8 points, but in all the sort of transformed schools, there's a rich extracurricular provision there, whether it be, you know, football, whether it be dance, whether it be whatever, outward bound activities, whatever. But it's a very clear part of the expectation and entitlement of being a member of that school. And then the other one, which I don't know where you are on this really, but what seems to be absolutely critical in very high performing schools that have broken the mold is the sort of the way in which they assess, track progress, set targets of youngsters. The technology still lags behind our aspirations here, and most schools who are doing well on this have actually adapted existing programs for their own purposes. And there's a fitness for purpose thing here. We're still in a state of reinventing the wheel a little bit here. What's quite important, though, is that we are monitoring the kids' progress and that we're putting in support very, very quickly. If you don't have again, we discussed this with Trish. I pushed her a bit on this yesterday. But if you don't have a sort of a monthly, 6-weekly cycle of assessment of youngsters' performance, then you've really got to be asking yourself why. I'd actually want it to be a little bit sort of shorter than that. Particularly in your setting, targets are then set in discussion with students and parents. And then how we use assessment for learning, how we actually build the kids into this process so that they understand their learning needs, their learning goals, where they're actually going. You know, one of the schools that surveyed for the 12 schools study, when you go in there, they have, it's a secondary school, they have on the corridor a sort of a sheet for every youngster, which is about where they're currently performing, which level they're doing, and that is expressed in very, very concrete. So kids know where, you know, they can describe the skills they've got, they can begin to describe the skills that they want to achieve and how they're going to go there. So the concreteness of language is really important in terms of sort of assessment for learning. Okay, so let's just take another 5 minutes on that. Write down what you're doing in this area. You've got good practice to share, and if you need support, note that down too. Inclusion, and again, this is sort of a bit of a catch-all in many ways, but it's about how we operationalize this. Seems to be, you know, critical here. We all talk about, you know, the concern about individual students, but what are the systems we have in place to actually deliver on that? And again, we saw a number of examples from the video, particularly how we kick in support pretty rapidly after sort of monitoring. We've talked a bit about student voice. And I don't know about your own experience here, but I've been in some schools, some very high-performing schools recently, where they've really been very, very good at integrating young people with pretty high levels of disability. They may well be taught in a separate unit inside the school, but the unit is often, pretty central inside the school. It's there for a particular reason, because they want to build a feeling of an inclusive community inside the school. And the effect that has over time is really powerful, because if kids are beginning to interact with other youngsters who are in wheelchairs and so on, they begin to take that as being a very normal part of their lives, and that does add to the richness and deepness of the culture there.